Good morning and good afternoon. It's great to see that we have so many participants joining this webinar called Step by Step, the Higg FEM Verification Trail, Section 5, Wastewater. We from Leadership and Sustainability are looking forward to spending the next hour with you. And this is the fourth in a series of webinars where we will take you into depth into the different sections of the Higg FEM, the Facility Environmental Module. Let's check the audio quality. Can you hear me well? If you could just send me a comment in the chat box, please, so that I know that you can hear me. Yes, okay, that's wonderful. Thanks a lot. That's great. So my name is Karen Ekberg, and I'm the founder and manager of the consulting company Leadership and Sustainability. I have spent nearly 35 years in the sustainability area, worked in many different sectors, and since more than 10 years now, I'm working in the textile sector. And before I started my own company, I worked several years at Adidas. I was responsible for environment globally and setting the goals and the strategy for environment. And this role included developing the environmental strategy for the supply chain as well, together with our business functions and regional representatives. And we will now have a brief look at how to use the GoToWebinar features. You are muted today in order to have the best audio quality that we can get. Otherwise, there is usually a lot of background noise. And we will have time for questions and a discussion towards the end of the webinar. But you can begin sending your questions already now during the webinar by using the question function. And the presentation will be available for download after the webinar, and it will be possible to watch the recording. You will receive an email with the details just a few days after this webinar. So let's begin. We will introduce you today to the SAC Higg FEM Facility Environmental Module with the section 5, Wastewater. And as I mentioned, we will have time for your questions. And finally, we will also make an offer and present our team to you, our growing team. Let me introduce you to the verification trail and the purpose of the verification trail. The purpose of this trail is to give you a better and deeper understanding of the Higg FEM, and we will take you through the Higg FEM section by section and make you acquainted with all requirements in the How to Higg and in the Higg FEM. But before we continue on our trail, I would like to give you an overview of the self-assessment and verification process. So we have identified 7 simple steps. You complete your self-assessment for the FEM, and this is where our webinar series strives to support you in how to best complete your self-assessment and thereby also preparing yourself for a verification if you are deciding to go for a verification. Then if you do that, you need to engage a verifier and provide information on the type of factory you have, number of employees, etc. And you then make the self-assessment available to the verifier. The verifier will review the self-assessment, the documents before the actual verification and send you an agenda as well ahead of the on-site visit. And then during the on-site visit, you go through the questions together, probably online, and you also look at all the documents that you have. And finally, you will have a report in some format. So we usually produce a PowerPoint report at the end of our verifications. And there is also from SAC, there is an on-site verification guideline, and you can see the link down at this slide. So when you get to the slide deck, you can click on that link and find the information about the process of the on-site verification. For all of you who are doing your self-assessment or preparing to get verified, and I realize that some of you have already completed the self-assessment, perhaps even once before or perhaps even twice before. But anyway, here is some general advice for how you can prepare and do your self-assessment. You do need to appoint a person who is responsible, who coordinates the actual exercise and the filling in the Higg FEM self-assessments. You should read the How to Higg guidance and the verification preparation guidance as well. There is a wealth of information online available in the How to Higg documents, and it's really valuable to read and have a look at this documentation before you begin with the self-assessment, but of course also during the completion of the self-assessment. And I cannot stress this enough, it is really important that you respond accurately to the questions. So do your best to understand the questions and what is the meaning of the questions, and then also document your responses well. We often see during verifications that perhaps the wrong documents have been uploaded, or they have been uploaded than where they actually belong. And this makes it more difficult to do the verification, but it actually may mean that you may lose some of the results that you would like to have. So please take some time to do that rigorously. There have sometimes also been problems with the platform in terms of downloading those documents. So I suggest to you that you build a folder on your own computer where you post all the documents as well, sorted to the different sections and the different questions, so that you have them really readily available. All right. And then let's get back to our trail. This is the overview of all the sections that are included in the FEM module. And today we will move on to the section 5, the wastewater section. And in the wastewater section, first, we do have a few applicability questions. And you know, the applicability questions, they are there in order to understand what type of facility you have. So in some of the sections in the Higg FEM, you have those applicability questions. And they help the system to understand what type of facility you have, and then accordingly give you the questions that you should be responding to. So obviously this is really, really important. In the water section, for example, there is a question about risk. If you are in a water scarcity risk zone, and here in this case with the wastewater, there are questions related to if you generate industrial wastewater, if you generate also domestic wastewater, and how you treat them. Then also, do you have a zero liquid discharge plant? And we see sometimes that some facilities respond yes here, although you may not have a zero liquid discharge plant actually. And so please read up on this in the How to Higg and make sure that you respond correctly here. So zero liquid discharge, that is a water treatment process in which the entire stream of the wastewater is purified and actually recycled. So at the end of the process, you have no wastewater leaving the plant. Or you have a very, very concentrated brine. That might be a possibility that as well, that you have a very, very concentrated brine from the recycling process. And then also, do you treat industrial and domestic wastewater together? And where is the individual or combined wastewater treated, on-site, off-site, or with a septic tank? So there are several questions here for the applicability, and it's, as I said, it's really important to respond to them correctly, because the following questions are lined up accordingly, according to your responses here. And now let us get an overview of all the questions that we have. in this section. So you see there are several questions at level 1, 2 questions at level 3, and only 1 question at level 3. 2 questions at level 2, and just 1 question at level 3. And remember how the scores are, or how the points are distributed over the levels. So you have at level 1, you have 25 points possible. At level 2, you have 50 points. And at level 3, you have 25 points. Sometimes, depending on the applicability, there may be some questions that you will not get, so to say, that will be removed from your set of questions, and then the points may be distributed a bit differently. But this is now the overview for the wastewater section. So several questions already at level 1. And now we will go through those questions one by one. And the first question is, does your facility track its wastewater volume? So we actually see that there are quite a lot of factories that do not do this. You may be tracking your incoming water into the factory, but you are not measuring your wastewater volume. But here, this question is about doing that. So the question is, what was the total quantity of wastewater discharge from your facility in 2019 now, when you are completing the self-assessment now? And then also which method was used to track wastewater volume. So in some cases, there are only estimations. And of course, estimations of the wastewater volumes are not that accurate as an actual measurement. And then what is the frequency of measurement? Do you have a continuous measurement? Or are you just reading on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or on a monthly basis, for example? And then also, what was the final discharge point for your facility's wastewater? And here we suggest that you upload your annual wastewater discharge monitoring record. And regarding tracking water and wastewater sources, so of course, you know that if you want to manage and improve your performance, reduce your wastewater flows, for example, then you also need to have KPIs. So essentially, we need to track how much wastewater we have. And how are we going to do that? Well, very simple, with flow meters. And there are different types of flow meters. So we have, for example, mechanical flow meters. They are the most common and economical type of water flow meters, and they perform flow measurement through turbine rotation, and possibly, depending on the type of wastewater you have, they may not be suitable really for wastewater. Then we have vortex meters. We also have ultrasonic water flow meters. If we have large pipes, we also have magnetic flow meters. They measure the speed of a fluid passing through a pipe using a magnetic field to measure the volumetric flow. They cannot measure pure water as there are no ions to measure. But of course, wastewater should be possible. And so, of course, the best type of flow meter, it depends on the specific application. And then the next question, and that is the question, do you have the name and contact information of the offsite wastewater treatment plant? So why is this important? Well, SAC decided very early on that they consider it very important for you as a facility to not only take responsibility for what you are doing on site, but also to take responsibility for what is happening of your different discharges and emissions. So in this case, the reason is that you should have the contact information is that you actually also contact the offsite wastewater treatment plant and ask them about their treatment results. And I realize that this is a question that is a bit uncommon to ask, especially if you have a municipal wastewater treatment plant and not a private owner. It's a bit interesting to ask the authorities basically for their treatment results, but usually you can do that, and you are credited for asking. So even if you wouldn't get any response, you do get credit just for asking. So you should know the name, the address, the ownership. You should also have a copy, of course, of your contract with the wastewater treatment plant. And it would be great if you could upload this contract as well. And then if you get the result, that's great. But you don't get penalized if you don't. What is important is that you ask them for their results. Okay, and then question number 3, does your facility have a backup plan if there is an emergency situation related to wastewater? And this is also a question where we see that some facilities don't really fulfill this requirement. So the intention is that you have a backup plan and installations to be able to take care of the wastewater if you cannot discharge it into the drainage, into the canalization. So, for example, a possible backup plan could be to have an emergency production shutdown, which is, of course, not what you would like to see. So you should have other backup plans. And one very common one is to have a holding tank. And so here, SAC and the Higg FEM is then also asking, what is the size of your facility's holding tank? Do you have any other secondary treatment, or do you have another discharge that you can do to an offsite wastewater treatment plant if your own is not working, for example, or do you have any other backup process? And you should then please upload accordingly the documents you have available. And then the next question, is hazardous sludge disposed of properly? Depending on the quality of your the wastewater you have, in most cases your sludge from the wastewater treatment plant will be hazardous, especially if you are treating industrial wastewater. If you are treating only domestic wastewater, it may be that your sludge is not hazardous, and this also may depend on your local legislation. So in some countries, all sludges are deemed to be non-hazardous, and in many countries you have different types of sludges according to legislation, depending on if you have a domestic wastewater treatment plant or an industrial or a combined one. And then so you need to have a proper hazardous waste treatment. The sludge may be incinerated, it may be landfilled. Open burning is of course not allowed in your facility at all of any type of waste. It may also be blended into fuel. In some countries, for example, hazardous sludge or other hazardous waste categories are incinerated in cement kilns, for example. Composted, if the sludge is hazardous, it should not be composted, and it should also not be used as a fertilizer applied to land. But those are the current options that you have when you respond. And then, of course, the suggested upload is a permit or a manifest for proper disposal. And how do you now decide if your sludge is hazardous or not? Well, first of all, you need to look at the legislation and the definition of hazardous sludge according to your local legislation. But then there are, for example, a test that can be done. It's the TCLP, the Toxicity Characteristics Leaching Procedures that you can use. And so you need a lab in order to do that. You check the leachate and the heavy metals amount in the sludge. And of course, you may have other toxic substances than just heavy metals. You may have pesticides, for example. You may have organic compounds that are toxic as well. And so, of course, also by using safer chemicals and decreased chemicals usage in your production, your sludge may become non-hazardous. And if it is hazardous, yeah, we have the similar treatment options that we already talked about, sludge treatment in special treatment plants for toxic sludge. Energy recovery is also a possibility in cement factories as a fuel, and then incineration. So in many countries as well, all toxic waste is incinerated. In other countries, toxic waste is still being landfilled, although that is actually not the best way to take care of hazardous waste. All right, you may also have a non-hazardous sludge from your wastewater, and that is what the question 5 is asking about. And similarly, we have, doesn't make sense really to have hazardous waste treatment for non-hazardous sludge, so I will just remove that option. But you may have incineration, you may have landfilling, you may have open burning, and again, on your facility site, open burning is not allowed according to the Higg FEM. You may blend it into fuel again. You may have composting. You may use it as a compost and also as a fertilizer. And you should upload the sludge analysis or test results and also any permits that you have in place. Then in some cases, especially at smaller facilities, you may have a septic tank to treat your domestic wastewater. And that is what question 6 is asking you about. So if you have answered in the applicability questions that you have a septic wastewater treatment tank, then this question will show up for you. And the question is, does your facility treat the septic wastewater before it is discharged? So how does your site unload your septic tank once it is full? Do you have an external service provider who comes and empties it for you? Or how do you, or are you discharging the wastewater in some way locally? So you need to describe where it is discharged, how it is treated also after the discharge, and also, of course, upload the corresponding documentation. Then here there is also a question related to an upgrade. So septic tank treatment is not seen as the most effective wastewater treatment. So the question from Higg FEM is, do you have a plan to upgrade to a more modern wastewater treatment approach? And this is a question, of course, that is very much linked to your local legislation. So if your local legislation and authorities, if they agree that you can still keep your septic tank, then it may be very difficult for you to argue that you should install a more modern wastewater treatment approach that may be much more costly, but it may still be something that you can consider. And just about the septic water treatment, I wanted to show you this slide as well. So you may use a septic tank if you don't have any other sewage treatment system, but it should be designed accordingly to your BOD load, and so to your biological oxygen demand load, and it may not be feasible for very large facilities. So typical septic tank removal efficiencies are 40% BOD, biological oxygen demand. So only 40%, 70% of total solids, and 77% of fats, oil, and grease. So the removal rate, the removal rate is not really very great, and so that's the reason why it's not that the most optimum way to treat your domestic wastewater. And here you can see also in this illustration that sometimes you have you may not have an external service provider who comes and empties the septic tank for you, but you may have an infiltration installation here where you basically discharge the treated domestic wastewater into the soil here. All right. Then the next question at level 2 now, and this is about are you reporting against the wastewater standard? So very commonly used wastewater standards is the ZDHC, the Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals, and its wastewater guideline. Many of your buyers may be asking you to report according to the ZDHC wastewater guideline, but there is also from BSR, there are also from IPE if you are based in China, and you may have other from your customers and from the brands, you may have other requirements as well. And of course, you probably always have your local legislation too. And of course, you need to accordingly test and meet all parameters specified in the standard. And in the Higg FEM, you may get credited if you reach certain better levels, for example, in the ZDHC, in the Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals wastewater guideline. And so there is also a question, a follow-up question within the question 7. Are your parameter results available on the standards platform? So this doesn't mean that you have done the analysis and send it to your local authorities. Here, the question is really about, are your results uploaded somewhere on the standards platform, like, for example, the ZDHC platform, where you can upload the results so that they are also available. And also, if you are using the ZDHC wastewater guideline, are your test results, do they also show no detection of different parameters mentioned in the different limit tables with the limits within that guideline? So again, you need to upload the documentation, the wastewater test report, and potentially, for example, a picture of the ZDHC gateway. That's the name of the platform that ZDHC is using, so that we can see that. And now I would like just to give you some more background information about the ZDHC, the Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals program. So in 2011, Greenpeace launched the Detox campaign. They collected actually many samples from well-known brands and their suppliers' discharge points, among others in China. And they measured the levels of pollutants in the discharges. And then they made a report about that, and they basically showed that the wastewater limits were not always met, and that there were several hazardous chemicals present in the wastewater, even though they were not always above the limits. And they put a lot of pressures then on many brands and asked the brands to basically commit to eliminate 11 priority hazardous chemicals and decrease the discharge of general effluent parameters. So this was the starting point. And with the detox campaign of Greenpeace, as a response to that, the Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals program was actually launched and started, and it's still alive today. It has grown into quite a large organization based in Amsterdam, and I actually had the pleasure to be a founding member at the time when I was at Adidas of the Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals program. So that is also the ZDHC, the MRSL we have as well. It's not the wastewater standard, but it's connected to that, the Manufacturing Restricted Substances list. And that is a list that clarifies which chemicals you are allowed to use in your manufacturing if you are committing yourselves to the ZDHC MRSL. So this is not about the final product. There we use the concept of RSL, Restricted Substances List. But this is the concept of making sure that the production itself, the manufacturing, and the chemicals used in the manufacturing are restricted. And of course, there is a reason for that, because the RSLs, they point to the end product, making sure that there are no harmful chemicals on the final product. But in the production, in the manufacturing, you may be using chemicals that may be reacting during the processes, in the dyeing process, for example, in the finishing process, and may not be ending up, so to say, on the end product, but they may still be harmful in production for the workers, but also for the environment via air emissions or wastewater discharge. So that's why the concept of the MRSL was implemented. And yes, again, coming back to the ZDHC wastewater standards, they actually have some sampling deadlines for that work twice a year. Usually they take their samples. All right, and now coming back again to your external wastewater treatment plant. So remember, we had the question about having the address, etc., of the offsite wastewater treatment plant. And here we are now asking about have you also requested wastewater quality test results from that plant? So you do need, if you want to score here, you do need to show that you have actually asked them. So if it was via an email or via a more formal letter, you should also upload this letter. And of course, if you have a response, if you have received quality results from the wastewater treatment plants, you should also upload that. And then regarding your indirect discharge, you should, as we said already, request the wastewater quality results. You should look at the quality records and have a look, and you may even make an on-site visit. And when we go into the section on waste, you will also see there are questions there related to making on-site visits to the places, the installations where the waste is treated, especially the hazardous waste. And this is a similar question related to that. All right, and now we have come to the final question, and this is the only question at level 3, question 8. Does your facility reuse and or recycle process wastewater as a process water? Do you have like a closed loop system? And here you do need to upload the documentation, etc., and explain how your recycling process is organized and is structured. And in order to score well here, you actually need to recycle 80% or more of your total wastewater. The total wastewater output that you have, you need to recycle at least 80% of it or more in order to get full points here. So this is a very challenging question, and not many facilities yet can reach this. And if you can recycle 50 to 79%, then you get partial points. And finally, if you recycle perhaps 25%, so less than 49%, then you actually don't get any points at all. And if you are not aware, if you're recycling, but mostly you actually are aware if you are or not, then you get 0 points. So in a world where fresh water is an increasingly valuable resource, industrial processes threaten its availability on two fronts unless the water is treated and recycled. Many industrial processes require water and then reduce the availability of water for the environment or other processes, or alternatively contaminate and release water that actually damages or pollutes the local environment. So therefore, zero liquid discharge is a water treatment process in which all wastewater is recycled and purified, therefore leaving zero liquid discharge at the end of the treatment cycle. So it's a very advanced wastewater treatment method that includes ultrafiltration, reverse osmosis, potentially evaporation, crystallization, and other methods as well. And it's a process also that in some countries, for example, in some regions in India, have been made mandatory by the local authorities. So the benefits are that you have lowered wastewater volumes, and also you can decrease the cost associated with the wastewater treatment. But obviously, to build this recycling plant also costs a significant amount of money. So that could be a really good benefit. What I wanted to say here as well is that I do think that the zero liquid discharge process is a really great treatment, but you also need to consider that at the end you do have a brine, a highly concentrated brine or a salt, for example, and currently there are no good treatment methods for this type. So it's basically also waste, and most of the time it is a hazardous waste that you have at the end of the process. And here you see also a very, very simplified flow scheme of the zero liquid discharge process. So you do have the wastewater treatment, your so-called, for this process, a pre-treatment, and then usually you have a membrane treatment. You may have an ultrafiltration and then reversed osmosis. You may even have an evaporator, or you take just the brine basically from the river. Then afterwards. So this was some more details about the zero liquid discharge approach. And with that, we have actually covered all questions in the wastewater section. And now I would like to move over and see if we have any questions from you in the audience. So let me have a look here. Yeah. Okay, I have one question here. Is the Higg index under upgrading in this period? I find a total different frame in the website and it's not possible to see the past module I inputted in. So I do not find the questions you are explaining. There have been some changes to the layout of the site, but it shouldn't look very much differently. And last time I was logged in, I couldn't see any differences, and it should be possible for you to see the past module. If you have any technical problems with the platform, I would suggest that you use the question button. When you are logged in, you can see at the top, a bit on the right hand side, there should be a question mark. You click on there and you can send a support question. Yeah. All right, great. Please do that. Great. Any other questions or comments? Let me see. Yes. So that means here we have one question. So that means 80% or above recycled water required to get the full points. if the brands have communicated to suppliers that they should install a reverse osmosis plant. I don't know of any brand that has communicated that specifically. So it is very different from brand to brand, exactly which requirements related to the Higg FEM that they have. So I don't know about this. But also remember, this is the last question in that section. So this is the only level 3 question. So which means that if you have full scores on all other questions, you should already have 75%. And so this question then would cover the final 25 points. Yeah. So it's, as I said, I don't know exactly what the brands are asking of you. Any other questions? There is a question here, what is the difference between the ZDHC portal and gateway? So the gateway is where all results are uploaded, and the portal, it may be just the general ZDHC website. Any other questions? No. All right. But please feel free to send in your questions to us separately if you have any. Here is a question. If factory have only SDP, any need to upload ZDHC test report? I'm not sure I am clear on this question. Could you explain a bit more what you mean by this question? So the requirement regarding ZDHC, that's not a formal requirement or a legal requirement. This depends on the brands and the buyers you have. You may have brands buying from you that have asked you to follow the ZDHC wastewater guideline and to upload the reports accordingly. But if you don't have that, then it's not a requirement to do that. Yeah? All right, great. Thanks for the questions. And then we will continue. So I also want to give you some more information about our offers. So we offer training and verification in many countries, and we have been verifying in several of the countries listed here, probably in at least 20 different countries. We have local verifiers also in several countries. So for example, we have in Bangladesh, we have in Turkey, we have here in Germany, we have in Tunisia, and we are also soon having more verifiers, for example, also in China. So we can support you in many places of the world with trainings and also with verifications. And I also want to encourage you to begin to plan your verifications quite early. In our experience now, over the 2 past years, 2018 and 2019, that was that we got a lot of requests towards the end of the year in September, October, November, and even mid-December for on-site verifications. And it is very difficult to plan on such a short notice, and then the calendars are mostly quite full as well. So it would be really helpful if you could seek to plan as early as possible if you want to do a verification. And also please be aware that In order to do a verification with a third-party verifier, you need to also buy a separate module. So if you have the FEM, that is for your self-assessment. In order to do the verification, you also need to buy the VFEM. That's a separate module. Some of you may already have bought it as a package, but if you haven't, please consider this as well. And also, please mark it up in your calendar. You can only buy the VFEMs until the last day of October, until the 31st of October. After that, in November and December, you cannot buy the VFEM. You can still do the verification until the end of the year, but you cannot buy the VFEM. And we had a lot of hiccups, let's say, about that last year. All right, and I also have another news for you, and that is that leadership and sustainability, we're not only approved as an FEM verifier body, but we have also been approved as an SLCP verifying body. So in the future, we are also intending to conduct a social and labor compliance program verifying, or FSLM if you are doing it according to the SAC program. So please contact us if you are interested in verifications. And then also, if you want to go back and listen to some of our previous webinars, here is a list of them. You can then, when you get the presentation, you can click on those links. Otherwise, you can also go to the leadership and sustainability to our blog, go to our website and then select the tab blog, and then you can find all those webinars as well and listen to them or download the presentations. So we invite you to do the training and verification with us. You can book a time with me to have a conversation about your needs, but you can also contact us directly. So you see the links here to myself, to Aladdin or Okur in Turkey, but also to Hafizur Rahman in Bangladesh. So please don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions. And also, if you need support with developing, for example, improvement programs based on the Higg FEM, you are most welcome to contact us, and we would be happy to support you there. And now, our final slide. Here you can see our team members. We are growing. We are hiring a senior person here in Germany as well. And with that, I would like to thank you so much for joining us. There will be a survey after we close this window, and please feel free to respond to that survey and give us input. It's really always valuable to get input about what worked well in the presentation, what you would like to see next time, what we can do better, and also any other questions that you have. So for now, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day, and goodbye. Bye-bye.